Good morning. Today on Spotlight, a debate over Michigan's Proposal 2, the battle to stop gerrymandering of voting districts. Of the 3 statewide ballot proposals, many believe Proposal 2 is the most confusing or complicated of all of them. Katie Fahey of Voters Not Politicians and Tony Daunt of the Michigan Freedom Fund will be my guests. It's Sunday, October the 21st. I'm Chuck Stokes, and this is a Spotlight on the News Democracy 2018 Election Special. Katie Fahey, when voters walk into the polls on November the 6th, you want them to do what when they look at Proposal 2?
I want them to vote yes on Proposal 2 so that we can end gerrymandering and have fair, impartial, and transparent elections here in Michigan again.
Tony Daunt, what do you want them to do?
I want them to vote no, and it's because this proposal is costly, unaccountable, complex, and unfair.
Let me tell you what they're going to face. The first thing they're going to look at is going to say a proposed constitutional amendment to establish a commission of citizens with exclusive authority to adopt district boundaries for the Michigan Senate, Michigan House of Representatives, and the U.S. Congress every 10 years. All right, on the face of it, that sounds pretty simplistic. Sounds like it's, you know, who could be against trying to stop gerrymandering? Tony Daunt, is it that simplistic?
It's not that simplistic, and you know, as I pointed out, excuse me, at the beginning, this proposal, you know, although it may sound good on the surface, when you dig into the details, you'll find that there are many things wrong with it. And one of the things related to the simplicity is, and I mentioned, is complexity. And this is, you know, that's just the first few words that are on the ballot. The proposal itself is 3,200 words long. And if you want some perspective, the Declaration of Independence, the U.S. Constitution, and the first 10 amendments, the Bill of Rights combined are 6,300 words. So this is fully 1/2 of the 3 main governing documents, founding documents of this country. And when you get that complex, there's going to be mistakes, there's going to be unintended consequences, and I don't think it belongs in our Constitution.
This will be a 13-member commission, 4 Democrats, 4 Republicans, 5 independents, or people who have not been affiliated with either one of the major parties or any particular political party. And you think that when you get through this is the voters deciding how the districts are going to be drawn, as opposed to politicians and Lansing and those that have partisan intentions drawing these lines in the past.
Really, this started back in 2016. I saw friends and family who normally don't engage in politics for the first time starting to engage. And that was really over 2 different people. I saw a lot of friends and family being drawn to Bernie Sanders and a lot of friends and family being drawn to Donald Trump. And when I tried to think about what did those 2 have in common, I think it was their core message of drain the swamp and the political revolution. And to me, that meant that the status quo, the current system, is broken. And we do know that it is. We know that there are different systemic reasons why our votes don't count as much as they should. And gerrymandering, where politicians get to literally look through and say, okay, I want you to be my voter, I don't want you to be my voter, is one of those things that leads to people feeling like their votes don't matter as much as they should. And it really only benefits politicians and political parties instead of us as the regular folks.
The proposal says that these 13 people will be selected randomly by the Secretary of State. Explain that, because a lot of people think, well, how are you going to select them randomly, and out of what pool does that become?
Yeah, so it's basically like a lottery for registered voters, and it will be a weighted lottery, which means that it should match the demographics of our state, meaning that not everybody should be from the same city, not everybody should be from the same economic income or look the same. It should actually look like 13 people who look like the people of Michigan. And people can apply as long as they're a registered voter, but the Secretary of State's office will actually mail out applications as well to 10,000 people, kind of like jury duty, except you aren't forced to do it. You get to opt in order to do it, but really just trying to get an actual representative body here in Michigan that can help go across our state and listen to communities and understand where they're coming from.
Tony, is this really an open process for the voters, or is this can you take the politics out of politics?
Well, you know, that's in many ways you can't. You know, like you say, it's inherently political. And
there are a lot of people that cannot be part of this random pool.
Absolutely, and that gets to my point of it being unfair. You know, the supporters of this want to engage more people in our process and put this in the hands of voters rather than politicians. But when you look at the details, it excludes hundreds of thousands of people, if not, you know, close to 1 million, based on their already being civically engaged. And I certainly understand if, you know, if we want to look for a better way to do this, if we want to maybe exclude state legislators, if that was part of this. But it goes so far, it excludes precinct delegates, the most basic level of election here in Michigan. It excludes people active in their local county party, Democrats and Republicans. And not only them, but it excludes the family members of those people, you know, your parents, your spouse, your children. And even step-parents and stepchildren. And you know, they'll say that you can go and attend the hearings, but it's not the same. It is excluding you from serving on that commission, and I think that that's discrimination. We shouldn't accept that.
All right, we need to take a little break. When we come back, I want to talk about some of the districts as they currently exist and how some of these lines have been drawn and what some of these districts look like, and also about who might be behind both sides on this proposal from funding on down. We'll be right back with Katie Fahey and Tony Don. Stay with us. And welcome back to Spotlight. Katie Fahey, in the proposal it says that these districts should be, if it all goes through the way you want, it will make the districts compact and contiguous districts of equal proportion. Now, if we look at the districts now, particularly like Congressional District 14, some others, weird shaped districts.
And huge, too.
And huge, and for the representative, he or she that represents that district, they're probably putting a whole lot of miles on their car trying to configure just weird shapes. If everything goes through the way you want, those districts will look like what?
So the district should look more like the actual communities we live in. Because right now we have representatives trying to, you know, represent one part of Detroit and one part of Farmington and one part of Livonia or Novi or Rochester, whatever those might be, but not an entire city, even though it should be focused more on that. When you go to buy your house, you're probably looking at your school district, the community, where you go to work, your immediate neighbors. But those common sense things are what are left out of the redistricting process right now because politicians are only looking at people based on whether they vote as a Democrat or
feel
Republican.
The motivation in the past, and let's be honest, it's happened with Republicans when they're in control, it's happened with Democrats when they're in control, is they work very hard to make sure that they keep the advantage that they have, their partisan advantage. So even though hopefully they feel like when it all comes out, it sort of looks like it's representative, but it's really stacked more for one particular party.
Yeah, the League of Women Voters actually has a lawsuit right now against the current set of maps saying that they were drawn with that intent. And if you read some of the emails that have come out from that, it directly says, okay, yeah, let's make sure that we have Democrats here, Republicans here, and can guarantee an advantage for the next 10 years. And that's, I think, one of the biggest highlights of this is these lines are only redrawn once every 10 years. So if you have the cooks in the kitchen really trying to make it towards their advantage, it is going to be 10 years worth of elections that your voice either counts less or counts more.
All right, Tony Don, he has referenced some of these emails that have been floating about. Republicans have been in control of this state for 8 solid years. They control every major branch of government. Certainly, there are going to be people on the Republican side say, nothing wrong with the system, seems to be working just fine. But if you're sitting there in a very diverse state like this and you're looking at the congressional balance that the Republicans have, you say, wait a minute, you know, and then you look at the popular vote in the last presidential election, and then you look at how close it was between President Trump and former Secretary of State Hillary Rodham Clinton, you say, wait a minute, that can't really be representative.
Well, you know, it's interesting because when we hear about why this is such a you know, gerrymandering, or the way redistricting is done is such a problem, sometimes it's because the elections aren't as close as people think they should be, or because the shapes are funny. And you know, certainly politicians are going to maximize the system to their maximum gain. And I'm skeptical of government. I'm skeptical of politicians, of Republicans and Democrats. And I think that maybe we should look at a different way of doing this. But we have a choice.
What would that way be?
You know, there's numerous other methods that states have done. You know, Iowa has a model that doesn't take this process completely out of the legislature's hands because, you know, the accountability is important. And once these 13 people are on this commission, they are accountable to nobody but themselves. And there's no way to remove them. There's no way to hold them accountable for any kind of misdeeds, not doing their job. The only way that they're held accountable is if enough of them vote each other off.
What's the interest of the Michigan Freedom Fund in this? If you look at past history of the Michigan Freedom Fund, a lot of it came out of a few years back when you fought for the right to work legislation here. If you go to your website, you're endorsing pretty much all Republicans down the line, Bill Schuette, Tom Leonard, and it goes down the line. We know that in the past there's been close affiliation with the DeVos family from the west side of the state and some of the funding there, and Greg McNeely and others. So clearly people are going to look at your side of the fence and say, he's protecting the status quo here.
You know, I certainly would expect that, but we have done a lot of work over those 5 years, 6 years that we've been in existence, fighting both Democrats and Republicans on matters of policy. We believe very strongly in free markets and in individual liberties and in accountability for taxpayers and for voters. And as I mentioned, the accountability isn't there for the citizens to hold the individual members of this commission accountable, and the cost. You know, I mentioned that earlier on. This thing is essentially a blank check for the commissioners. It establishes a minimum of what the salary could be. It establishes a minimum of what their budget could be, but not a word in there about a maximum. And I think that it's reckless, and it does that kind of.
You think it could be into the millions?
Oh, I could, far beyond the millions. You know, several organizations have just, nonpartisan organizations have just put out studies that say this could be, at least or a minimum of $4.5, $5, $6 million.
Yeah, but that actually, right now we currently pay for the redistricting process, and we don't actually know how much we're even spending because we can't use the Freedom of Information Act on our legislature to even understand who all was in the room and how much money was spent on this. When you look at this cost, it will be giving us actual trust in the current redistricting system. When we did the math, it would cost maybe about 11 cents per Michigan taxpayer once every 10 years, which is about returning a pop can and a penny. So I like saying a pop can and a penny. But what you also see in the 6 states that have passed something similar is they actually save taxpayers dollars, because in the states that have passed these, lawsuits are brought less often, and Michigan people are currently paying for the lawsuit going against the current set of maps, and the maps are not overturned, because if the maps are overturned, then you have to repay all of that money to go and fight that lawsuit. The key part of our policy is the transparency around it. This commission cannot meet behind closed doors. Everything they do, including the computer software they're using to help draw these maps, will all be made public instantly. So if anything fishy is going on, you're seeing it instantly. And also because it's in the Constitution, the rules for how these maps have to be drawn are very clear, when right now they're kind of ambiguous, and our politicians really get to call the shots when this will have very clear rules that the commission has to follow.
All right, I need to sneak another break in. When we come back, I want to ask you about Democratic money that may be involved in your proposal. We've already talked about Republican money that's perhaps on the other side of the fence. We'll be right back. Stay with us. If Proposal 2 passes, Michigan will be the largest state that will be voting on these kind of redistricting changes and could set an example perhaps for the rest of the country. You're a Democrat?
I'm an independent, actually. I think millennials, we really like being able to think for ourselves and don't like being beholden to either party.
Why were you campaigning for Hillary Clinton, or at least showed up on her victory night, or what was not her victory night, what she hoped was going to be her victory night in New York?
Yeah, I didn't campaign for her, but a friend actually, the day of Election Day, had an extra ticket to go, and it was anticipated she would win. And as a young woman, thinking that I could be able to watch our first woman president be able to accept her nomination felt like a pretty cool thing to see. And so when I got the opportunity, I went out to New York, really actually after I had voted. But I have voted for Republicans, Democrats, and actually third-party candidates.
So you don't lean one way more than the other?
Not really. I think, you know, it comes to different issues that I care about, and especially at the local level, I think there's a lot of things to consider that aren't the national talking points, but that impact my community.
I hear that your parents voted for President Trump.
Yeah, my parents and most of my family. That's actually why I started this, is I wanted to work on something together, because the 2016 election was pretty divisive. And I thought, you know, I think a lot of us stand for fairness. A lot of us want a system that we can trust. And so my parents
Did they think you were crazy when you went out and started this proposal?
A little bit, I think, but my mom ended up gathering 500 signatures. You know, she's going out door to door talking to people every day. And my, you know, siblings who also voted for Trump are also fully on board too. So it's been actually a really great positive experience for us.
All right, your critics, and I'm sure he'll make the point in just a second, will say that this leans towards Democrats. You guys started it because you're upset that President Trump won, and he won Michigan in a state that was, quote unquote, at least nationally, supposed to be a blue state. And this is a way to sort of rebalance the scales. Former Attorney General Eric Holder has money or affiliation involved with this. You've got Common Cause from California. You even got Arnold Schwarzenegger just came in and did some campaigning for you and supporting Proposal 2. I know that he's not a Democrat, he's Republican. You have Joe Schwartz, who's also Republican, on your board. But I think the vast majority of people say it seems to lean towards the Democrats more than it leans towards the Republicans.
Yeah, I think that's an easy talking point to make. But if you actually look at our campaign, and we're very happy to disclose all of our donors, the Michigan Campaign Finance Network is a great resource for being able to look at all of that too. We actually have over 10,000 individual Michigan people who have donated a small grassroots funding to make this campaign possible. When we were looking at printing petitions, it cost $40,000 to just print enough petitions to gather the 315,000 you need. And so we looked at, okay, if there's 4,000 of us, how many of us got to go talk to how many people to raise the money to do this? So actually the majority of our funding has come from the people of Michigan. You brought up Arnold Schwarzenegger. He is a Republican governor. California, even though they vote more Democrat, the Democrats were gerrymandering the Republicans over there. So he helped champion making it so that the Republicans would no longer be gerrymandered, kind of the opposite of Michigan. But in Michigan, we're a truly purple state. The Democrats have gerrymandered, the Republicans have gerrymandered. People keep talking about this blue wave potentially. If the Democrats are able to take back the governor and they are able to take the House and maybe even the Senate, they'll be the ones in charge of gerrymandering next time.
Tony, do you buy that?
Not really. You know, I certainly commend Katie in the work that she's done on this and the volunteers. Certainly, it's a lot of work to go out and get those signatures and make those contributions. But you know, the funding and the background of the Michigan Freedom Fund was brought up, and certainly, you know, I would expect people on the left to have some skepticism. And so conversely, when you look at the people who started this, the people on the board and their partisan leanings and the contributions they've made, if you look at the outside groups that have poured money into this, and you know, including Eric Holder's National Democratic Redistricting Committee, I think that it's a fair point that this is funded and promoted largely by people on the left, and it should make people wonder what really is the motive here.
All right, need to rush and get one more break in here. We'll hurry right back with some final questions. Stay with us. I would imagine that a lot of people are sitting at home right now saying, okay, what am I perhaps not hearing about these two individuals on Spotlight today? Katie Fahey, you came out of nowhere, started this, made it work up until this point. What's in this for you?
You know, honestly, I've always really cared about voting. I was really passionate about the Drain Commissioner race in 2016. But my friends and family kept not engaging.
In Kent County?
In Kent County, yeah.
Okay, on the west side of the state.
Yeah. But my friends and family, I'm always begging them to vote. And in 2016, when I saw them really being energized by Bernie Sanders and Donald Trump, you know, even if I didn't directly agree with how everybody was voting, I still wanted people engaged. And the fact that
We're not going to see your name on the ballot in the near future?
No. Politics, I've had enough of, I think. It's been a long 2 years. It's been really rewarding, though, to meet so many amazing people in Michigan who have taken their time and energy and resources. When you're doing it as a full volunteer gig, I mean, it has taken people not doing other stuff on the weekend to try and fight to make a better Michigan.
Tony Daunt, what's in your future? You've been out there fighting in the venues for these various proposals.
I just enjoy working on behalf of taxpayers in Michigan, on behalf of conservative policy and less regulation, and I look forward to continuing that.
We're not going to see your name on the ballot in the near future?
In near future, no.
No? Maybe down the line.
Very unlikely. I've learned to never say never, but very unlikely. I just enjoy robust debate. And this has been very rewarding to go out and speak about why Proposal 2 is a bad idea.
I've heard both of you, as part of your argument, at different times talk about drain the swamp. Is this going to drain the swamp? And is this going to drain the swamp whether you agree on the wording and the yes and no of this proposal?
I think it's the actual way to drain the swamp. We know right now that there is a huge conflict of interest with politicians being able to pick and choose if they want you to be their voter or not. They are rigging the elections. And the only way to combat that is if the people of Michigan look out for ourselves and demand it.
Tony Daunt, we hear the president all the time say it's time to drain the swamp, give the power back to the people, take it away from the politicians.
Absolutely, any individual is better equipped to make a decision for themselves than anybody in the government. But because of the complexity of this proposal, you'd be substituting the swamp with a quagmire, and I think that it's the wrong choice for Michigan. It's the wrong solution, and I would encourage people to vote no.
All right, both of you have just about 30 seconds to be able to look into that camera, give the voters the last pitch. Tony, you first.
This is a costly proposal. It's basically a blank check for the 13 commissioners. It's unaccountable. The people on there will be accountable to nobody. It's complex, 3,200 words, and it's unfair in that it prohibits hundreds of thousands, if not a million, Michiganders from serving on this commission and participating in this process. I urge you to vote no.
Katie Fahey, your turn.
On November 6th, we will be offered an opportunity to actually start having fair, impartial, and transparent elections again. The only people who are going to make this happen are the actual voters of Michigan. Right now, we are going to continue having rigged elections and having a lack of transparency that makes people feel like it doesn't matter if they show up to the polls. But on November 6th, if you make it to the bottom of the ballot, you flip it over and you vote yes on Proposal 2, then we can actually start having a fair election system here again in Michigan. The only people that are looking out for us are the voters and not the politicians.
All right. Katie Fahey, thank you so much for coming in. Tony Daunt, thank you.
Thank you.
That's the argument for and against Proposal 2. Good news is you at home on November 6th get to make the final decision. I'm Chuck Stokes. We'll be back next week with more newsmakers in the spotlight. We hope you have a great week.